Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Night Vision. I'm Renee Barnett, your host. And today I'm going to get right into it because it's Old Home Week. We've got James Martin, our historian, with us. And he's made some rather exciting, well, I won't say rather exciting, I'll say mind-blowing discoveries this week. Some I know about and some I haven't heard about, and I'll hear about right along with you. I got Biggie over here in the background and Spiky right here beside me. Hopefully we'll have we'll have some peace with the dogs all around. But if not, you'll have to forgive us. This is a doghouse after all. Anyhow, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and bring James up and just say hello there.
Hello, everyone. Good to be back.
Yeah, good to see you.
Exciting week of discoveries, I've got to say.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. Well, I should start out. I don't know. I can't remember if I had asked you to take a look at Cuisa, France, or if you just were doing it on your own anyway. But it sort of all started rolling out with some discoveries that you made right there in Cuisa, in the village where the new La Confluence Center is going to be opening. Well, it's there now, but it's not open yet. So right across the street from the center is some very exciting, hopefully, remains of a Templar chapel. And then I know that there's a cemetery somewhere. It should be a cemetery somewhere around there that we're going to go and try to find, or you will if I don't hurry up and get over there. But anyhow, yeah, it started out with the Templar discoveries, but then something happened. And how did that even? You were researching for your Templar book series, correct?
Yeah.
And then how in the world did you happen to stumble across the information that we talked about this week?
So when I suppose it's like this, when you're writing, there are certain times that the book begins to write you. Spoilers, everyone. I was just writing about a group of, beginning to write, I should say, about a group of Vikings that are still speculative in history, I suppose, but there's a lot of sources from from the Viking period. These are a group of people called the Jomsvikinger, and they essentially were pagan and then Christian religious officials who went out and fought very fiercely against the enemies of the Norse. And like I say,
the early Vikings, or was that just a different branch?
The early Vikings were pagan and then Christianized. So, this group sort of survived the Christianization process. I will just say there is a lot of debate as to whether or not these, crack forces, if you will, existed. But nonetheless, it adds to the story of the Templars because, of course, when you think about the Templars, warrior monks, there you've got some Norse. And we do know that the Norse were in areas that would later be lands of which would be controlled by the Knights Templar, whether that's in Great Britain, France, or even in parts of Spain. And it was doing that research that I came across well, as odd as it is, came across a stone that was believed to have been a rune stone in central France. Now, having looked at some images of this, no. It's either heavily weathered or just doesn't make any sense. That then, of course, leads on to other things, such as the extent by which the Vikings... Now, let me just say, I will use the word Viking because it's easier for people to understand, but I just want to be very clear. They didn't call themselves the Vikings. The term Viking means, well, anything from explorer to pirate, really. So you go and do a Viking. You don't call yourself one. The reality is, at the time, they were known as the Norse, the Northmen, or in Latin, the Nortmani, which, oddly enough, is where we get the Department of Normandy from the Norsemen. A good place to start, really, because I think most of us would be aware of Normandy, and some of us will have heard of Rollo, the Viking, and Rollo's descendants, who stayed in Normandy after being bribed by a French king. And some of those
descendants of Rollo, some of the Sinclairs are related to Rollo, and some are not. So I guess that's supposed to be the line that we're looking at, or that everybody has been looking at, is the one from Rollo.
Yes. So Rollo, as I say, just the story, what we know about the Vikings in France, for example. We've got Rollo. Yes, he's given part of Normandy in the Treaty of St. Clair-Surette, which some of the people who stayed in that town ended up developing their surname St. Clair or Sinclair. We know other descendants of Rollo, for example, William the Conqueror, who came about and took over most southern England before eventually moving further north. And that's what we know. I mean, this is the stuff that when you're in school in Britain, you study. You'll be aware of it. And that, for my life, has been the extent of the Vikings settling in France. That's it.
Well, which makes sense. I mean, because, that they would have come to that northern shore. But the rest of what you found was what didn't make a lot of sense, at least according to the public story at all.
Yeah, and it's the extent by which the Norse, the Vikings, had penetrated France. And we're not talking, so the idea of the Vikings being these pirates, explorers, whatever, but that they are coastal raiders. We know that they settled in England eventually, but you're settling on an island, so you're always close to the coast.
Yeah, always got water around.
Yeah, exactly, and lots of rivers and all of the rest of it. What I found, I'll just preface this: there are exceptionally few modern sources relating to what I'm about to go into. The latest I managed to find anything, I suppose, was actually in a newspaper article, which was from 2018, which, if I just give you a rough idea, and I'll quote here, "It is true that there is very little historical work on the presence of the Vikings, especially in southwest France. It's an area of history that has been little explored for the time being, for the good reason, because we have so few archives on Viking presence south of the Bay of Biscay or of the Charente. Yeah, absolutely fine. No issue there. That's the historian Alban Gauthier, who was actually responding to a very unknown theory around Gascony, which I will come to because it's quite exciting, I think. So, just so we've got the preface, there's not much by way when you think of the Vikings, you sort of immediately will think of Britain, Ireland, maybe, Scandinavia, obviously, maybe northern France, Iceland, Greenland, and then over to Canada at their ship repair facility at Lonsa Meadow, and the descriptions of North America afterwards. What you don't think of is the Vikings getting into central France and constantly raiding. And so I'm just going to bring up, I do apologize for everyone. I can't make the image any bigger or anything like that, but I'm just going to show you a map of the extent of Viking sieges in France. And if you're watching this, what you'll be able to see, if you're listening to this, I should say, what you'll be able to see is a heck of a lot of sieges of significant cities and towns from the south of France and the Mediterranean over to the Atlantic coast, and then as deep in as Clermont or Clermont-Ferrand, as we will call it today, just north or just within the Massif Central. You can see that the Norse are travelling via river, for the majority of it. But also what you'll note is they are targeting not just religious sites, but sites, for example, on the Camino roads to Santiago de Compostela. So that's France. If I show you Spain now, it's slightly different map. Again, you can see, they raid Santiago de Compostela, Seville, Cadiz, etc., etc. So, there we go. That's the significant find. But then just having a look at what they were doing in cities has been really, really for me quite fascinating.
Well, when you think about it, though, it's much bigger than just a surprise. To me, to be fair, if this information is fully substantiated, which I believe that's what you're doing now, then we could make a case for, at one time, the Vikings pretty much ruled the world, the known world.
They did. I mean, when you think about it, the cartographical knowledge, the knowledge of geography that the Vikings must have had, because they are attacking, for example, if we get into southern France, we know that they sacked Narbonne in 859. They also attacked Nîmes, Arles, Montpellier in 860.
Yeah.
They weren't traveling from the north, so they weren't going down a river, via Paris and then carrying the boats to the next river. No. They're traveling around the Iberian Peninsula, so around Spain and Portugal. And you've got to just bear in mind this is quite dangerous because at this point in history, most of Spain, with the exception of really the north, I suppose, a thin slither along the northern Spanish coast, is under control of the Moors. These Islamic Moors get its name from the people group who settled in Mauritania, for example. but essentially it's in Islamic Caliphate. And at the closest point between, on the Mediterranean, the closest point between Europe and Africa is in the Straits of Gibraltar, which we used to be called the Pillars of Hercules. So imagine these Viking ships getting through there when it's controlled on both sides by an Islamic Caliphate. It's quite dangerous, yet they did it. Now, that also leads us to some of the other sources with this. A lot of the sources are from Islamic scholars who did take quite a lot of notes. As opposed to Christians who who end up writing about these raids, maybe a few years later. We do have some contemporary information from Islamic chroniclers.
Was there any indication that there was any kind of cooperation between the Vikings and the Moors at all, or were they fighting each other?
Yes, and yes. So they were fighting.
If they were able to get through the strait, there might have been a reason that they were able to do it. They might have had some sort of an agreement. So
you've got temporary alliances, certainly. To be fair, though, when we think about the Norse, what we need to just remove from our heads is an idea of one big unified country, like a power block, because the reality is there were so many strong independent towns and settlements in Scandinavia. Hedeby, for example, Nidaros, today's Trondheim, where you had the local chieftain, and they're the ones that are sending out these parties. So we're not talking about a country. So my suggestion would be something like give us passage through the Straits of Gibraltar, and here's some money that we've basically raided our way down and pillaged a few French monasteries, and here, have some of the gold. What we do know, and whilst our focus is on, I suppose, Western Europe, I can tell you that in the Eastern Europe, where the Eastern Roman Empire is still around in the 9th century, what you have is a group of Vikings called the Varangians, who become very much like the Swiss Guard, I suppose, for the Pope, become a crack elite body of people who defend the emperor. And incidentally, just a little tidbit here, there is a rumor around these Varangians that when the emperor died, they had right to pillage the imperial treasury. It's not true. It's a lovely myth, but it's not true. What was true, though, is that the new emperor needed them on side and gave them lots of gold. The reason I mention them is because it is connected. We know that there were some ambassadors exchanged between the Islamic Caliphate and these Varangians, certainly in the east. So you've got Ahmad ibn Rushta and Ahmad ibn Fadlan. Rushta's a little bit more flattering about the Norse, whereas Fadlan's, he clearly doesn't like them. He can't abide the liberation of women, that you had strong women. He sees them as being impure. Actually, our Viking friends bathed nearly every day, deknitted their hair, 6 foot, 7 foot strapping men, and I suspect there's a bit of jealousy going on there.
Yeah, I'm sure there was. How were they bathing in France at that time? Not very often.
Well, bathing's, not very often. You did have, you've still got the legacy of the Western Roman Empire. So you still have the baths and all of this. But again, I think I've said on the show before, if you get into a time machine and go back, don't go for a bath. Unless you see a plug, in which case you might be all right. These things are not cleaned.
Oh.
Yes, it's... it's not particularly cleanly. But what you have essentially with the Scandinavians is very similar to what you've got today. Perhaps not steam rooms, but bathing in baths really, and rivers, and and all of the rest of it. So there was a view of cleanliness in Western Europe. Having a bath is becoming a bit more like taking medicine. You should only have a bath when you're ill. Right. We know that that's probably not the best idea. You should shower and you should bathe frequently. But, this isn't connected, but I'm just reminded by the Venetian ambassador to England in the time of Elizabeth I, who writes that Elizabeth it takes a bath once a month, even though she's not ill. Oh, wow. So that's the kind of idea that we've got. So yeah, you have these Norse, these pagan Norse, and a bit of a mystery relating to Gascony, because these raids, whilst there have been some finds, mainly around the Seine River in Paris, coins and axes, and that kind of stuff. We know that they had placed cities, towns under siege. So where are the hordes? Where are the spoils? Spoils. That's it. And really, it takes a little bit of time to sort of process a lot of this. But the best thought I have is that they were slave raiding. And in fact, this is sort of new information, I suppose. I have found, now please, can we all be adult when I say this? But this is in the Catulery of Condom. Oh. Right. This is, so yes, here I am talking about condom. No, the town name doesn't relate to the other type of condom. But yes, the Catuleries reference slave raiding. So you have found that now? I have found that, and that they were actually targeting monks. That was a good intuition on your part, because I remember when you said, that. Yeah, that could be the answer, because where's all the stuff, and otherwise. So, you've got something from 858, which is called the Annales Bertiniani, who references a few things. So, in 6 years, Bjorn Ironside has just rolled into West Francia, ruined at the head of this adrift kingdom. The king, who's someone called Charles the Bald, has essentially given up and gave the lands to these invaders. Close quote. I mean, that comes directly from the Annals, and I thought, well, this is unusual. What do you mean? What do you mean you've given up, land? And it would seem that on the southwestern coast is an area known as Gascony. It would later be a part of the Kingdom of England, and Gascony is the pronunciation in the Gascon language of Basque. So the Gascons and the Basques are essentially the same people. Oh. I'm expecting some very angry emails now, but essentially, if you just look in history, that's it. And it would seem that we, or at least I've not been to the Basque Country. I mean, maybe through it, but I've never been there to really do any looking around or anything. But I know that
a lot of people that watch and listen to this show would know about the Great Cross of Ande that is there in the Basque region. And I believe there's been a second one identified that's nearby. I want to say, is it in Girona or is it somewhere still in the... Now, is Girona in Basque country? No.
Girona's near Barcelona.
Right. So you're already out of that Basque area by then. But it's interesting that it's going through the Basque region because those are people that we just don't know a heck of a lot about, especially their origins and in their language. And, there's something different, or unique about the people, certainly their language, certainly their DNA. So I think we got a lot more to learn about the Basque people.
Absolutely. And, fortunately, like a lot of languages and what we saw in the, the build-up to and aftermath of World War II is a lot of the suppression of languages, and, the Basque language is returning once more,
After World War II, there was a sort of move to suppress certain languages.
Yeah, you had a fascist in charge in Spain, in Franco, who had, essentially began clamping down on, native languages, Basque, Catalan, for example.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So he was wanting everyone to speak Spanish.
Yeah. And it's no different to what the English did to the Welsh. And, that's what imperialists do.
What they try to do here, and people get angry when they hear people speaking a different language. Speak English. It's like, I don't know. It doesn't bother me, and if they're not talking to me, I don't really need to understand what they're saying. And, then we end up losing all these languages, like, a lot of the Native American languages that we're trying to recapture and pass along to the young people now.
Well, if we lose language, then we then lose understanding of what people were writing about in the past, the traditions, and effectively, you can't have culture, and cultural differences and understanding if you then want to attack one thing that is at the heart of culture, which is language. But so why would the Norse, one of the Vikings, seem to focus on Gascony? And my suggestion is, well, it's much quicker to go along the Pyrenees. So if you imagine from the northern side of the Pyrenees right down, it's a much narrower isthmus is what we would call them, but it's easier to go over land that way than it is to sail right the way around Spain. And again, especially if you have potentially hostile forces in the Moors. So my thoughts are that this is why they did end up settling nearby. So we know that the Ile de Ré, Ile d'Oléron, for example, these were main ports, ship repair facilities that the Norse had, settled, but certainly were using for supporting their raids deep into France, but also then over into Spain as well.
Now, do we know yet how far eastward? I mean, we're talking about, Iberia and France. Did they stop at the what would it be, the German border or the Belgique border? I don't know. Or did they keep going?
Oh, well, so the Swedish Vikings.
And if they were in Spain, in southern Spain, which obviously they were from the map that you showed, then I would think they would have also been in Africa.
Yeah, well, much later, 200 years later, when we're getting into the 11th century, yes, the Normans, the Norsemen controlled Sicily and bits of North Africa.
Yeah.
100%. You've got the Swedish Vikings were, remember, the further east you go in Europe, the less water there is, or certainly less ocean.
Right.
But plenty of rivers.
Yes.
And unfortunately, though, with rivers, what you have to do is you have to row. And the Old Norse word for row is rus. And this is where we can say that Kiev was established by the Rus. Quite simply, Russia, Belarusia, Ukraine were established by the Vikings. There is a Viking who I haven't read about for quite some time, and his name is Ingvar the Far-Travelled.
Mm-hmm.
And we have these lovely nicknames and all the rest of it. But Ingvar, as far as we know,
it's going to be Ingvar the Far-Travelled and Charles the Bald, or Pepin the Short, or
Charles the Fat.
That would have been my big fear.
I wouldn't even want to think what they would call me.
They would pick out some feature that, you're probably trying not to highlight and then call you that every day of your life. It's like fear.
Of course, you have Ivar the Boneless, who, there's two theories with this. One, that he was called the Boneless because he had a disability. Doesn't really fit within humour of the Norse, to be fair, but actually he was called the boneless because he was impotent.
Oh, man. That does make sense, I have to say.
And most certainly fits in with...
I must have had a sense of humour.
Oh, yeah, and quite guttural as well. We really don't want to go into it. I don't think we'd be able to, actually.
Oh, right.
But yeah, Ingvar the Far-Travelled went down the trade... sorry.
Ancient peoples were kind of nasty. We hear some of the Roman humor that was just, toilet humor, literally toilet humor.
What's wrong with that?
It's a tradition that's carried on to this day.
It is. I think if you're from the north of England and in Scotland, I think some of the Scandinavian legacy is actually, we have a very different sense of humour to those in the south of England, for example. Ingvar the Far-Travelled got as far as the Kingdom of Georgia, where he fought some battles. This is on the Silk Road, which ultimately leads to China.
When you think about the Norse, when you think about the Silk Road, that doesn't normally come to mind.
You don't, but the fact that he's called the Far-Travelled, there are 26 rune stones. They're called the Ingvar rune stones, that describe going into essentially Saracen land and then over to Georgia. Whether he got further, well, unfortunately, as yet, we're not too sure. But most certainly they were aware of the Black Sea, and again, we can't think of this as a unified country or anything like that. That comes eventually with time, and actually Christianity, I suppose. But, these are independent
groups.
Groups and all of this. And we know some of their leaders, and some of them are mythical, maybe based with a bit of truth, but, lots of sagas around the campfire, a bit of mead, a little bit too much mead, perhaps. And then, of course, someone who, I don't know, for example, rescued a few sheep, suddenly, had a valiant struggle against warriors and beasts and all of this. And actually, it was just a shepherd kind of thing. But if we just come back to Gascony, because again, I've got some further quotes around Gascony. For example, these are in the letters and decrees of Pope John VIII. Gascony in the 880s was in full desolation. No traveller ventured to cross it, especially in its western part, which was more affected than the others. The Bishop of Auch, also then, 879, explains that there had only 3 suffragists installed within the eastern seats, and the west was totally deprived of pastors. So they've done quite a bit of a number in Gascony. They have really raided. And I can give you a bit of a flavour also of some of the things that they were taking. So, for example, when you think of when you think of raids, you think, what are they taking? And I think I've answered this with, yes, they're slaving, people, in other words. We also know there was quite a famous battle, I suppose, which stymied, I should say, the advance of the Norse. And this is at the Battle of Tala. But we get something else from this. And again, this comes from the Catulerie of Saint-Pierre de Condom, where there is a reference to the possession of a venerated relic, which was a cross that was taken back from a Norse leader called Eirald. That's Harold for me and you. And he had this relic around his neck. So, I mean, this doesn't, mean too much. I don't know what the relic exactly was, but it gives you a bit of an idea that if this is what they're doing, they're going into churches as well and taking particular relics. What else did they take?
Right.
And, Gascony is under the control of, it's an independent kingdom, kind of, under the dukes and kings of Aquitaine. We know a very famous leader of Aquitaine, who's Eleanor. She comes around in the 12th century. But there is this idea that's been muted that the kings of Aquitaine let the Norse in so they could go and do a number to the Franks, to the Carolingians. And I can't...
didn't like too much that, there was a woman operating in that position anyway.
No, well, much later, but I'm skipping ahead a little bit. If I need to remark on this, eventually, what happens though is, and this is up for contention. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this. The Norse are eventually stopped, and there is a view that they didn't leave Gascony; they stayed and settled. And this view, where we can begin to form a bit of a temporal link, actually, if this is true, it certainly whether they settled, it doesn't matter for this, because Aquitaine would have end up getting back on its from its knees, and then became very famous in medieval history for the quality of its shipbuilding. In fact, when the English took over, they frequently referred to, I think it was Bayonne actually, for the quality of their ships, and most ships were ordered from there. And this ship-making tradition extended up the west coast to the places like Bordeaux and, crucially, La Rochelle.
Mm.
And so it might be, in fact, that, when we just begin to look at things, that shipbuilding, it become a very big maritime power, Aquitaine. And our Eleanor, who ends up marrying, the French king and then the English king, not at the same time. But
no, only men can do that.
yeah, it's possible that ship-making tradition actually came from the descendants of the original ship makers, the Norse.
That would make perfect sense.
More research is needed for that. What I'm not saying is that if you're from Gascony, you're clearly Viking, but it would be interesting for some DNA testing, unfortunately, which is banned in France. So how we would end up doing that, I'm not sure, but it's a theory. There is another thing, though. Now we've mentioned Eleanor. Remember, the Norse had what were called thingers. Not fingers, things. And these things are essentially parliament. So the Icelandic parliament is called the Althing. The oldest parliament going, actually. It might just very well be that Gascony and Aquitaine, which he was a part of, there is a bit of it's a bit unusual because they didn't develop a feudal system until relatively late for feudal Europe. And it just got me thinking before, we came on air. I do wonder whether or not that these, free assemblies of free men, essentially, is why feudalism didn't take root until relatively later, but also why it's not that much of a problem with Eleanor. She's from a tradition where, women were certainly fierce and, were much more independent than women in Europe generally were. It's interesting. And again, just to, come back to Gascony, the reality is that, Gascony, monastery building comes to an abrupt stop. There's no churches built for about 200 years. Just bear in mind that the Norse are pagan, certainly in this period. I do wonder whether there is just something there again that says, well, if they did control the area,
would they be building churches?
Or is it that they just devastated the economy so much so that there was no money for anything? But if that was the case, why would they keep on raiding?
Right.
But from Gascony, if I just bring up our map, this one's a little clearer for everyone to see. But if you, on the western coast, you can see Bordeaux, and then you've got the Garonne River. The area south of the Garonne on this map is the area that we're talking about, Gascony. What you can see, though, is that they got as deep as Toulouse also. And when you think of Toulouse, you do not think of, it's near the coast.
No.
But they got there twice. They seized Toulouse in 844 and 864.
It's wild because some of these places they would take it and move along and then come back and take it again.
Yeah.
Some of those cities were taken like 3 or 4 times.
Absolutely. I mean, whilst Paris isn't that an important city. In fact, the the siege of Paris, of which there were many. So, for example, 845, 856, 861, 865, and then 2 years between 885 and 886. That latter siege, essentially, the result is that Rollo, the Norse under Rollo, get Normandy. But Paris isn't that significant. There's monasteries there. It's an insignificant city, really. It's strategic, but that's about it. Well, if it wasn't for the Norse constantly raiding it, and the strategic need to stop the Norse traveling down the river systems and what have you, it wouldn't be the capital of France today. So we've got a legacy there, which says, what the influence of the Vikings in Europe, I think, has been deliberately, actually, tarnished
and suppressed.
Exactly. You have a initially pagan a group of people who here's something you might not think about, but people like me do. We were told by the church, these were pagans. They became Christian, and all of that. And before that, they were evil, murderers who just, we were the innocents. And I'm sorry, that's just not true. In fact, after one siege at Paris, the Norse moved to the city of Hamburg as the Pope had installed a new bishop there, the first one with one mission to convert all the pagans. Now, you see, that's the nice, pleasant version of the story.
Right.
The reality is they were being converted either by baptisms of drowning or in boiling oil. So who's the innocent party? But if we want to just have a look at the extent of the influence, not just into France, but think about in the English-speaking world, all of our days of the week are named after pagan belief systems. Monday is Moon Day. Tuesday, Tyr's Day, a Norse god. Odin's Day, Wednesday. Thor's Day, Frigga's Day, Friday. And then we're back onto Saturn, and then the sun. It's a little difficult to swallow that, these were just a group of raiding pirates with no culture, because it's just totally untrue.
Yeah. Hey, can I ask you something? We talked about the Norse going to the New World, and particularly Canada. Where I grew up in Oklahoma, there was a giant stone known as the Heavener Rune Stone. Oh, sorry, Bijou's making a fit. It's we used to climb on it, and when we were kids and play on it. I had friends that lived nearby there, and I would go visit. Later, it was finally translated by a lady named Gloria Farley, and there was a date there of 1012, and it was said to be runic writing. So if it was 1012, does that make sense in the timeline?
The Norse are certainly around. They're still just about using runes. In fact, the movement from runes to the alphabet probably took a lot longer than I think people realise. It's possible. I urge caution, though, and this is where, if catch me on one day, I'll think, oh, it's possible. Catch me on another, I'll dismiss it. I'm very much on the... you've got the Kensington runestone, I suppose, is the more famous one. which describes, bloodied people. It's in runes, and it's from, I think, the 1380, something like that.
Right.
The reality is that's very late.
Right.
For runes. It's not impossible, by the way. I'm just saying it's late. And the description
Has the authenticity of that been established?
Well, it has, and then it hasn't, and then it has, and it hasn't. There's counters for absolutely everything.
Sure.
And the problem is, if you've returned to find most of your party with blood, the last thing I'd be doing is going, pass me that chisel, I'm going to start carving. I'd probably want to get out of there. Now, again, catch me another day. No, of course, that's what you would do. You would explain, what had happened and, essentially give them some offering. But again, we're not these, if the Kensington from Runestone is correct and genuine, it would have been carved by Christian.
And who was that dated? Was there a date on it, or how were they able to establish a date?
So there was a date on it, yes.
Something.
Again, some of the runes, you can tell that they're much more recent because of the way that runes develop. And unfortunately, we only found out about these umlauts really from the 1960s. So we know that the stone was found in the 1890s. It's not possible for someone really to have forged what was on there. Or is it? He's so tricky with it. I mean, personally, I think his name was Olaf Ullman. He was, a migrant from Sweden, I think it was. And I think it's 1362, actually, I think it's dated to. And he says he finds it, in a tree root and all of that. Look, it's certainly possible. The Norse, I think we've got to establish, used river systems. They were, with 100% proof, were in North America. They had a ship repair facility at Lancer Meadows. The United Nations, UNESCO site established from 1960, proves that they were at least in Canada. We know they referenced 3 places that they'd visited: Markland, Vinland, and Helleland. Markland, the wooded area, Helleland, the literally hell, nothing grows there. And Vinland, yes, it could mean the place of vines, but, fertile pastures. I think there's absolutely no doubt in me that they were on the eastern seaboard. They had a name for the natives, Skraelingar, which unfortunately I can't give you the translation because it's quite rude. But they had names for them. So this is extensive contact, by the way. So we know that they were in North America. That's not a doubt. But I do just, I suppose, have to make the point. When you might be familiar with the Norse raid at Lindisfarne, Holy Island, which is said to have began the Viking period. And, there's a chapel on Lindisfarne that was established by Aidan, who I think was a contemporary or student of Columba in 635. It is suggested on June the 8th, 793, that the Vikings basically raided. Okay, that's written about quite a few years after the event. But there's zero, none, nothing in the archaeological record that supports any such raid. Nothing. Now, what you're going to get from an historian, so I'm going to pick on one, Dan Snow, good historian. And he says, the archaeology has been lost. Well, we've got to play fair here. If someone says the Kensington runestone's real, the first thing that people ask for is, where's your evidence? Provide evidence, prove it. Well, I also say that about Lindisfarne. I've got no reason to doubt that people wrote about it, that they raided and suddenly and somehow they left from Nidaros and with brilliant fortune managed to sail across the North Sea to, a monastery. It was very good luck, wasn't it? But if there's no evidence for it, we're just basing it on the musings of people like Alcuin of York, who's nowhere near. He's about 600 miles away in Paris at the court of Charlemagne. So to answer just shortly, I don't know about the Oklahoma runestones, the veracity, etc. All I can say is it's possible. In fact, all I can say with the extent that the Vikings were invading from the south of France, the east, the north, Spain, from Santiago, etc., is I can also tell you that I don't know what they took from some of the churches, cathedrals that they plundered. Any relics, anything that might be more interesting to people who are involved in the Rennes-le-Chateau mysteries and the Templars, etc. To the people who are interested in Christian history, I suppose. I can't rule out, not that it's up to me to arbiter these things, but I can't rule out that the Norse didn't take something. I can't equally say that it didn't end up in North America.
Well, we've run right up to the edge. And before we get out of here, I wanted to remind people that your book, written with Tim Wallace Murphy, Uncharted, is on sale on Amazon. And I think there's an audiobook also.
Yep.
That people can do. I'm going to have to start getting some audiobooks. I think that would be interesting. I'll just have to be careful, because as soon as I start listening, I'll fall asleep, no matter how interesting the material is, especially if it's a good voice. Has that guy got a good voice?
Nigel has a very good voice, yes.
Oh, my goodness. Next one, I want you to do it by yourself.
I think I'd send people to sleep.
People love your voice. They always say that. You know that.
Well, look, everyone, we're at the end of the show, so you can wake up again now.
That's right. Yeah. Bijou's awake. She's trying to get out the back door, so I guess I better get going. But thank you so much for bringing this new information out, and look forward to further developments of it, because I'm sure there's going to be more. You've just started to pull the thread. So when Vikings ruled the world, I can see it now. New series. All right, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening wherever you are. And we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye.